This is John Kinch with Michigan Energy Options. Welcome. We have a good crowd today for this webinar according to GoToMeeting. This is the second in a three webinars we're doing this winter around solar. And today we're going to be talking about some work in Detroit that's very exciting. But first, as I've done in the past with some of these other webinars, I've looked out my window in Grand Rapids. I work and live in Grand Rapids. Michigan Energy Options has offices around the state in Marquette, East Lansing, Grand Rapids. I look out my window and I try to determine what kind of a solar resource we have going today. And it's pretty dismal, to be honest with you. In fact, I looked at an article the other day about the weather in Michigan this month, and in Grand Rapids in particular, we've seen only 32 hours of sun this month, which is something like 13% of possible sun. So this is hibernation weather. So if you're not hibernating, you probably should be at this point. But of course, that doesn't mean that solar doesn't work in the state of Michigan. It does work quite well, and there's a number of reasons that it works. One is that it's a year-long resource. So in the summer months is when we really have solar production gain. And also it has everything to do with the economics of the energy industry. And we have relatively high energy prices in Michigan, so solar works in that regard. And also there's a lot of good drivers happening out there. There's good policy. A lot of clean energy companies are located in Michigan, and we have a lot of corporate companies in Michigan that want solar as part of their portfolio so they can meet their climate goals. So it does work, it's just not working today. So I want to tell you about the last in the series of 3 interviews we have coming up next month, and that's with Gretchen Bakke, and she's going to be talking about the grid. She's an expert on that, and she's written a really wonderful book called The Grid that I recommend highly. And we've been in correspondence since, and she's going to be trying to drill down a bit and talk about the grid situation, the transmission and distribution system in the Middle West where we're located. So I look forward to that. I hope you will join us. We have locked in the date. It's on February 20th on Thursday. So today, I have the pleasure of introducing Nishat Kaleen of the Office of Sustainability in the city of Detroit. Nishat and I have had the pleasure to work together on the Detroit Solar Feasibility Study, and that's also included a number of her colleagues in Detroit as well on this project. But we're really going to talk about the contextuality of solar in the larger arena of sustainability. Solar is not the cure-all, as much as I like it. It's one solution out of many that need to be working in concert. And the Office of Sustainability in Detroit has done some wonderful work to lay the groundwork for the city really coming back and being able to ideally adopt all kinds of sustainability solutions that will help it both economically, environmentally, and of course, with the good people of Detroit. So with that, I want to introduce Nishat and ask you to go ahead and tell us what's going on, and then to remind everybody that if you have a question for us, send it in the chat room, and Michael Larson will interrupt our conversation if it is germane to that particular moment. Otherwise, he'll park it, and we'll leave plenty of time at the end for to answer questions from the audience. So thank you. Nishat.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me all right?
Yep, we can hear you.
All right, thank you. Thank you, John, for that introduction. Again, my name is Nishat Kaleen. I am a project manager with the City of Detroit's Office of Sustainability. I've been a part of the team for a little over a year now, and in that time, I think we've done some very exciting work, including our Sustainability Action Agenda, some work internally to the city, and this solar feasibility project, which we've partnered with a great group of folks on. So I am very excited to have this opportunity to share with this group a little bit about what our office does, talk about energy a bit, and to give you a preview of some of the tools that we'll be releasing here in a few months. So if we can move on to the next slide. I want to talk about the Detroit Sustainability Action Agenda, which if you folks on the line have not heard about before, it is a very exciting agenda. We released it last year, and the solar feasibility work is really tied into the goals of that agenda. This is the first ever sustainability plan for the city of Detroit, and you can check it out on our website there, which is detroitmi.gov/sustainability. Also on that page is where you can sign up for the newsletters for our office, which we send out roughly on a monthly basis. And those newsletters will definitely include information on these solar feasibility tools when they're up and out and ready to share with the world. The agenda is really a roadmap to realize a vision for the city where we see Detroiters thriving and prospering in an equitable green city where they have access to affordable quality homes. They live in clean, connected neighborhoods and where everyone is working together to steward resources. And that vision is very well laid out in the diagram on the right side of the screen where our 4 outcomes are organized. And you can see that we do put people at the center of that vision. Everything from homes, neighborhoods in the city, we see as a way to facilitate and really make possible and really support healthy, thriving people in the city. I think this is a great point that relates to, John, your opening comments of, solar not necessarily being the cure-all and rolling it into a larger picture of sustainability for the city. Also, if you want to explore it further on our website, we lay out 10 goals associated with the agenda and 43 individual actions that we see as necessary to having us achieve those goals. And one of those is the expanding the adoption of solar energy use in the city. And additionally, the affordable quality homes is a very important role for, I think, solar energy and energy efficiency because we've seen that a lot of folks in the city are paying an outsized portion of their income on energy use. And we know, as John alluded to, that producing energy and reducing energy bills can really go a long way to make affordable homes continue to be affordable to live in. So if we can go on to the next slide, when we were developing the action agenda, community engagement and hearing from individual Detroiters was really important to that process. And in order to achieve those engagement goals, we did something I think was very critical to that, which is using and empowering 14 residents as sustainability ambassadors. That's 2 per council district here in Detroit. And those were individuals that had a presence in those council districts, that already had strong connections to their community, and they allowed us to reach over 6,800 Detroiters as we were gathering feedback and having discussion on getting this agenda together. That was done through town halls, different meetings that the ambassadors organized on their own or that they attended and spoke to crowds that were already gathering. And in addition, we had an online engagement platform where we used some surveys and some mapping tools to have folks help us see what they want to see in their communities. And some of those engagement opportunities actually was a great opportunity for the team working on the solar feasibility project to also gather input from folks who are working on various aspects of solar projects. And they also held obviously some engagement opportunities on their own. So moving on to this solar feasibility study, on the next slide, the project team that did all of this great work includes Elevate Energy, EcoWorks, the Great Lakes Environmental Law Center, Data Driven Detroit, Michigan Energy Options, and the Detroit Collaborative Design Center, with some additional help from other outside organizations that help with some analysis. They created and we're currently finalizing a really great set of tools that I think will be very helpful in catalyzing future solar work in the city of Detroit. And keeping with the theme of being resident-centered and community-centered, the approach that they took and kind of the framing of this project really had a focus on what the benefits to the community could be. So as folks may know, Detroit's in a pretty unique place where solar has the ability to do a lot of benefit for us, both economically. We have economically and even from a public health standpoint, we're in a position where there's space in the city, both on land and on rooftops, where we have the ability to incorporate solar into a lot of the work that we're planning going forward. The economics can work out well for individuals, by making energy more affordable, but also to John's point earlier of a lot of solar energy companies being located in Michigan. There's also a job creation opportunity there and some education and job training opportunities that can help individual Detroiters. And solar can also help from a resiliency aspect, making energy more reliable and getting to that public health aspect, the greater benefits of air quality. And also in a sense that's very much tied to the goals of the Sustainability Action Agenda. Solar helps a lot with both that mitigation and resilience goals that we have related to climate. To talk about a little bit about the deliverables of the solar feasibility study that are outlined on the next slide, there will be a set of tools and guides that kind of describe solar basics, background information that's necessary for folks to know if this is kind of their first engagement with solar projects. A look at some of those employment opportunities and some of the the projections of where jobs in the industry may be headed. Tools to help guide projects, and one of those tools being here's how we focus on energy efficiency first, which we think is very important. Design and planning guides. So there's a great solar design guide that lays out some examples and gives some information for how to make these solar projects be attractive in the communities that they're in, safe and welcoming, while obviously being incredibly functional. And those have some example drawings of what solar can look like on different building types to help people visualize it and make it seem a little more real. And there's also some permitting guidance involved in that deliverable as well. And as far as the regulatory landscape, we have a couple of policy guides that will help decision makers understand the current regulatory landscape and see what changes can be made and be advocated for in order to open the door further for more solar development. And what might be one of the more exciting tools is the solar feasibility map, that solar suitability map that was created by gathering a couple of different data layers like LiDAR data, GIS footprints of buildings and parcels throughout the city of Detroit. And that actually is a great tool to help determine the solar potential for those properties and those parcels. And it lays out different geographic areas of interest as well, like historic districts. It says which parcels are owned by the land bank, which are vacant, and what the potential is on uneven brownfields. So that is a really exciting tool that can help reveal what the solar potential could be on different plots of land and buildings in the city. And the last set of products are financial and operating models. So this will be an important tool, especially for the city and others, to see what the financial aspects of these kinds of projects pencils out to, right? What are some of the long-term costs, the upfront costs, potential savings on energy, and what those look like for different ownership models. So either owning it ourselves, or having some kind of power purchase agreement, or having a third party involved. So then moving on to the next slide, I have a couple of screenshots, a couple of examples that are from some of these tools. So here's an example of the solar design best practices. As you can see, this suggestion has solar on a rooftop, but also out in areas that'd be more visible to the public. If this was some kind of a facility or some kind of public building, right? There's solar at the ground level where folks can engage with it there, and that's an education opportunity, as well as all the solar on the rooftops that could add capacity there. And I believe the next two slides have some screenshots of what that online solar mapping tool looks like. So there's a zoomed in shot of a number of buildings in the city and what their solar capacity could be. And then the next slide shows what parcel specific data could look like. So you can see that it has parcel information and the estimates on solar energy, as well as whether or not it's vacant or owned by the land bank. So I believe that is the layout of the tools that we have coming up. We'll be excited to share them with everyone in a few months here. We're currently working hard on finalizing them, so it'll definitely be very exciting when those are ready to share with the world. So I believe that is what I have for formal portion.
Thank you, Nishat. I want to let everybody know that who has signed up for this webinar, because we have your emails, that we'll make sure when these deliverables, when these products are available through the City of Detroit's website, we'll send you a note so you can go and take a look at those yourself. Michael, might you explain for those out there who may have the technical ability like my own, how they can use the chat box?
Sure. So if on your screen there you go to the little dashboard for GoToWebinar, there should be a little box that you can pull down and have questions, and you are able from there to actually just type the questions into the box, and I can ask them there. But I do have one question right out of the gate, if you don't just mind me asking, because I think it's just pertinent to. Oh, go ahead.
Let me interrupt you real quick. One, leave this slide up if you don't mind, and then secondly, Nishat and I can turn on our webcam so you can see our smiling faces on a Friday morning. Go ahead, Michael.
So the first question that I've got is just really who is the audience that you think that would be using these tools that are out there? Is this for developers? Is this for city officials, or is it for individual business owners to kind of think through some of these processes?
Yeah, so I think that it is yes to all of those. The map, I think, is something that can be used by, that's definitely going to be publicly available. That is there for developers, for city officials, anyone who is working on, who wants to know what's possible for solar on their properties or a property they might want to develop. A lot of the tools that were around, solar basics, what the economic outlook is as far as jobs goes, those tools are more geared towards the general audience. And then a lot of the financial modeling, the policy guides would be incredibly helpful for decision makers at like the city level, and I would imagine other levels of government as well. So a good portion of these tools will be made available to the public, and I think probably they will be the most useful to developers and to city government.
Yeah, I would echo that. The map is wickedly cool and easy to use. I think a lot of people will just sort of enjoy taking a look at the city of Detroit with that kind of lens. It's pretty interesting. Hey, let me follow up on a couple things, if I might, Nishat, while others get a chance to put in questions in the chat box. As I think about Detroit, I think about several drivers kind of happening in different buckets to be making change there on the sustainability front. There's a city itself that's passed that greenhouse gas emissions ordinance, so maybe you could talk a bit about that. Also, the city, I think, has recently bonded several, maybe 100 million or more for improving buildings, which will include improving energy efficiency stock. You've got a 2030 district, which is really a kind of private market-driven effort among business owners to be less carbon intensive. And then you've got a really strong energy justice movement out of the community in Detroit that are also pushing. So I think all three of those, to my mind, are kind of working in a similar direction and ideally are helping to broaden the conversation around sustainability and clean energy, but also I would think, given your office, a certain amount of cachet to go and get things done. Can you talk about that?
Sure. I think that there is an incredible amount of momentum in the city right now, focused on sustainability efforts and climate mitigation and climate resilience. The very existence of our office is certainly a good indicator of that. I think that as the city obviously was very focused and still focused on a number of very pressing basic needs issues for a number of years. And I think as plans are put in place and as recently the city is able to look towards a longer term vision of what is possible in the next 10 or 20 years. And obviously there's a lot of development happening, there's a lot of change being made, a lot of plans being set. I think that the creation of our office was made at a really important time so we can help with that longer term planning. How can this redevelopment, this revitalization, or whatever you want to call it for the city, be done in a way that is sustainable, that is keeping the health and the affordability and the local environment in mind, of the local environment of individual residents in mind. And so I think that we do have great opportunities to build on that and to advise on that. And the greenhouse gas ordinance is certainly a very important step forward. That ordinance was passed last year, and it lays out goals for municipal greenhouse gas reduction targets over the next number of years. And so our office actually will be working on some of those strategies in the next few years. What does mitigation look like from an internal operations perspective? How can we lead the way? And to talk to your point of a lot of the investments that are being made into city facilities, a lot of city facilities are being updated for the first time in a while. A lot of them are seeing their HVAC units upgraded. And so we're lucky to be available and at the table to advise on ways that money can be spent to save money in the long term, to prioritize energy efficiency first, and to see what other energy options are out there for our city building stock. And then from a more private sector perspective, the work of the 2030 district is also incredibly important. That is a group of private buildings, and I believe there's some public buildings in there as well, who are voluntarily driving towards significant greenhouse gas emissions reductions. As we know, the building sector is responsible for outsized portion of energy use of greenhouse gas emissions. So I think the fact that folks are banding together and making those commitments publicly and really striving towards them is also really important.
Let me underscore you mentioned long-term planning for Detroit. Yeah, I mean, we see that all the time in our business, that whether it's a resident or a commercial business or a public institution or a municipality or even frankly the state, unfortunately, a lot of the realities, the economic realities, are kind of in the break fix realm, in which you're not going to update anything until it breaks. And this is a different ballgame with introducing renewables and doing these other kinds of things. I mean, they do require capital. They do require somebody to believe that it's going to have a payback in many ways. And non-energy benefits is one of those, but certainly saving energy and reducing fossil fuels and all the rest. It takes leadership for people to get their heads around in doing that. And we're seeing that more and more around the state. And I think as our largest city can help lead that for others to follow, that's a great thing.
Thank you.
Michael, you got any other questions in the box? I got more if you don't.
Yeah, certainly do. So one of the questions is, kind of coming back to some of the tools that are being developed here. So do the feasibility map, do they really refer to the technical feasibility of installing the solar on the rooftops, or does it actually also include financial, any financial feasibility as well?
Good question. I believe the map, and John, you can fill me in if I missed anything, is covering the solar potential of solar generation on the parcels and on the buildings. And as far as the financial aspect goes, the financial tools is separate from that map.
So, and I know Tim Skrotsky, who led the effort for Elevate Energy, is listening in to the webinar. If Tim wants to send a chat to you, Michael, to elaborate, have him do so. One of the realities of something like that solar feasibility map is that it's really kind of looking for where you can locate solar against other challenges, such as shading from other buildings. I think we're also looking at ownership of those particular parcels. We're looking at vacant land. One of the challenges for vacant land in urban environments is that it's not always going to be vacant, or not likely. And so there's a lot of pressure for urban economic development agencies, if there's a parcel of land that's open today, for them to not necessarily want to locate a solar array on that site, because somebody might come knocking in 5 years from now and want to put a high rise, which has a lot of more economic benefit through the eyes of the EDA, at least, than solar does. And I think there's going to be a tension in Detroit about locating solar on some of these locations because of that. And it's not a bad tension, but it's just something you have to kind of acknowledge and be aware of. As Nishat may know, we took a very hard look at the Coleman Young government building for putting solar on the roof there, because it's a beautiful building, number one. It's got good southern exposure, sort of. And it's, of course, a very prominent site. However, we found as we got up on the roof of that building and did some analysis via SAM and other tools we had, that it doesn't really make a good candidate because of a building to its direct south that would end up blocking it quite a bit of the time. And also because of its proximity to the Detroit River, we were concerned about wind load on those solar panels. It doesn't look good when solar panels go airborne for the most part. So it seemed like a high probable candidate, but when we did our final analysis, it didn't shake out. Instead, some other of the facilities that the city of Detroit has worked out quite well for being candidates for solar.
Overall, is there an estimated total solar potential in Detroit that you've estimated?
I would have to defer to folks who are a little more involved with the development of the map on that one. I do know the map does cover, I think, neighborhood scale solar potential.
Yeah, I don't know if we added it all up, Michael. But I will say this, that, when you look at something like solar, kind of the big picture, there's kind of three categories of it. There's the sort of theoretical potential. So theoretically, if we look at that map and put solar on each one of those roofs in those open spaces in Detroit, you could have a ton of solar there, right? But then there's the technical feasibility of it, and that has everything to do with whether or not those roofs are able to handle a load of solar, whether that property is you can put solar on that property, whether there's some other things going on. And then of course, there's the economic realities of it, like how can you pay for it? How's it going to be financed? So those tend to things, if you can think about it like a funnel, it kind of goes smaller, smaller, smaller till you get down to the point where as a solar developer, your opportunities and options are smaller than the wide world. You have to then begin to then work on those sites themselves. And then you face there some issues with local ordinances and things like that. That said, I know that Nishat, you guys are working on in Detroit as part of this project, improving solar permitting ordinances, those kinds of things. So at least when it gets down to that level of a project, the city isn't standing in the way. Do you have anything more to add to that?
No, only that we've also set, I think, as part of the Sustainability Action Agenda, a goal to across the board increase solar generation in the city to by the year, I think 2029. So the exact number is included in the action agenda, but I think that it is important to reiterate your point that we don't want the city or any other permitting processes or whatever to stand in the way of more solar development. So I think that these tools are going to be really helpful for that.
Right.
And I've got
oh, go ahead, Michael.
I was just going to say that I've got a couple more. I've got a few more questions here.
Okay.
But if you have something else to say there, I can hold
I
off.
can follow up. No worries. Go ahead.
All right. So the next, I've got a couple questions kind of relating to DTE. So what engagement did the team have with DTE, and how did the utility respond? With a secondary question, has DTE shown any movement on being more open to community solar?
So I do know that as far as the development of the action agenda goes, DTE was a helpful voice in that process. I think they were on our advisory council for the action agenda. We had a couple of groups that were advising us. One was an interdepartmental work group of leadership from different state departments, and one was a group of folks who represented different nonprofits and public and private sector organizations, and DTE was one of them there. And that they were involved in the creation of the action agenda. And as far as their direct relation, their involvement with this specific tool set, I don't think I can speak to that.
I can speak to that. We met with DT on a number of occasions, largely on the kind of the technical side of things, trying to figure out some of the information that DTE could provide us so we could begin to do some of the solar mapping and solar modeling and those kinds of things. Let me just speak more broadly perhaps about community solar, and especially this issue around low to moderate income populations or solar access. There's an emphasis now around the country to have community solar meet the needs of low income populations, because if you have the money to put solar on your roof, you're likely not probably a low income person. It still is, relatively pricey if you're going to own and operate that system. Community solar takes some of that burden away by allowing people to lease into a project where they may have a very small amount of investment themselves. It also takes the property away from them, so they don't have to operate and maintain that solar asset. I think you're just welcome to go look on the media that's been about Detroit and community solar and see some articles that are out there about it, talking about that dynamic between community members in Detroit wanting to explore something like community solar and what Detroit Edison's attitude is about it at this point. I will also just pivot from that and mention that there is a community solar House Bill 4995 that's in committee in the state legislature, and it's got bipartisan support. That means it's got Republicans and Democrats both behind it. And that House bill would intend to have a carve out for community solar. And part of what it would be able to do, I think, would be to make some community solar projects in cities, especially with low income populations being a part of it, more possible.
Great. So I think I've got a follow-up question to that, and maybe it's just to expand upon a little bit. Are you able to speak to kind of what steps there are or that will be put in place to help ensure equity and benefit of of solar kind of stays within the community?
Yeah, I think that some of the tools that we have will help make developing and going after solar projects a little more feasible and real. And hopefully that will help open this up to individuals more.
Yeah, and if I might add on that real quick, yeah, if the city is going to be sending out RFPs for solar, they can dictate in an RFP some conditions, and one of those certainly can be, equity, access, those kinds of considerations that a solar developer would need to meet for the project to be approved. It's perfectly acceptable.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of following off of a previous comment there about looking at as far as the state goes. So does the study suggest or speak to any changes that would need to be made at the state level that would enable solar for more Detroiters, such as any sort of legislation? And maybe John, you've already alluded to that with the House bill there on community solar. But is there anything else that's needed from the state to help Detroiters move forward?
Yeah, definitely. The two policy guides cover, one covers more state level, it outlays the state landscape and what are some possibilities and opportunities there, as well as at a city level.
Right. In a shot, I know obviously a city like Detroit has government relations and works with the State House in Lansing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is there any kind of summation you have about what's going on there these days? What are some of the focuses that the city is having on our legislators, and what are the? I mean, there's broader goals than just sustainability for the city of Detroit, obviously out of Mayor Duggan's office. I just wonder if there's anything that highlights that sustainability isn't just this nice to have over here set of needs, but rather it's something which is more central into what Detroit is doing moving forward, policy-wise or whatever.
Yeah, I don't know if I can speak specifically to many of the energy-related goals for that, but I do know that various levels of the city are engaged with making the city more of a affordable place and healthier and safer place for our residents to live in. A good example of that is our affordable housing work. The Housing and Revitalization Department does a lot of work in this area, ensuring that there is a wide access and availability of affordable homes for Detroiters, and helping to support those projects as they can. And also, I think there's a great opportunity for transit as well, because I think there's a large portion of Detroit residents don't own a car, and in the city of Detroit and this region, that's really essential and really key to accessing jobs, making living your life a little simpler, so you're not relying on car shares or infrequent bus service. I think we've done a lot there to expand 24-hour bus lines, and we're working with making it easier to get folks to and from job centers. And even I think there's a pilot right now for some of those last mile connections for bus routes late at night to get folks from a bus stop on a main line out to their home in the neighborhood as well.
Yeah, good point about multifamily, because we do a lot of work with that along with Elevate and others, and good work also. I mean, good point about this idea about Detroiters being renters. I think more than 50% of the population rents. So that makes it a difficult equation to get solar on people's roofs if you don't own the roof. It really does. So that's why a shared asset like a community solar project would make sense.
Absolutely. And that there's a number of issues there, right, with multifamily affordable housing. There's that split incentive of who's paying for the upgrades for the efficiency and who ends up seeing the actual savings on their bills. And so I think that, yeah, focusing there and on energy efficiency first is really important.
Yeah, and amen about pointing out the transportation sector as well. I think 60% in Detroit, of 60% of your greenhouse gases are coming from buildings and facilities, but transportation gets another big chunk of those greenhouse gases as well. So you have to be addressing that in tandem. So Michael, we're about out of time here. Is there a question or two to wind it up?
Yeah, I think we've got a couple. Just I think they're probably a little bit rapid fire kind of questions here. So I'm just going to kind of well, I'm just going to just list off the last three or four questions here, and hopefully they'll be fine within our last couple of minutes. And so the first one: does the city have any solar projects planned? The follow-up question to that is that is more on the citizen side. Are there going to be any incentives offered by the city to help develop residential or commercial projects?
Yeah, so I think we're exploring both of those options. As John alluded to earlier, there's a lot of investments happening on city properties, a lot of capital money that's available, and we're definitely looking for opportunities there to see where our office is looking for opportunities there to see where solar may be feasible. And as far as incentives for projects out in the community, that's also conversations that we're having, seeing where we can incentivize that privately.
And then final two questions is that will the map be updated and will it ever include tracking to where solar has been installed? So those are two questions. And then the final question is there an estimated time when the tools will be ready?
Great questions. We are working on what updating may look like. And that's a great point on the actual solar deployment out in the community. So to be determined on those. I think our launch date for this, we're aiming for like early March.
And Nishat, per the launch, might there be some events or ways the community can engage in Detroit around that? Are you guys planning some things like that?
Yeah, definitely. I think that we will definitely we'll visit a couple of key groups and give presentations on the tools and what they can do, what they can provide. There will be, I think, as far as any other events, we will probably, once they're finalized, share them out in our newsletter. So there will be opportunities. There's not set yet.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much. This has been really wonderful. And I want to commit again to letting people on this webinar know about when those kinds of things start happening out of your office. We'll make sure that people are informed. Also, if people so desire, you can listen to this thing all over again if you want to go on YouTube at some point and download or not download and give it a listen. But it will be on YouTube at some point with the link on our own webpage. And like I said, next month we're talking to Gretchen Bakke about the distribution and transmission grid around the country, but also ideally a little bit more in the Middle West. Nishat, any other closing comments? But again, thank you so much. This has been a wonderful opportunity to talk to you this morning.
Yeah, thank you for having me on to have the opportunity to talk about this. I'm very excited.
All righty, well, thanks. Happy Friday, everybody. Bye now.
All right, bye.